kind of fucked up tour is this? Welcome to Hey Guys Podcast. I'm Rob, this is Liam, and this week we watched the start of the Beige Volvo trilogy, the unofficial James Bond sequel that is The Rock, directed by Michael Bay, which is proof that even a blind squirrel gets a nut every now and then. When a terrorist and his men take over Alcatraz and demand money from a secret government slush fund in order to appease the memories of fallen soldiers, or he will kill millions with VX poison gas, I mean, sure. It's up to an elite Navy SEALs team, their chemical weapons expert and the only man to ever escape Alcatraz to save the day. About 30 minutes later, when the crack US Navy SEALs are killed in the dumbest way possible, it's up to said Alcatraz expert and weapons specialist, who loves the sound of his own voice, to do what the Navy SEALs couldn't, and that's save the fucking day. There you go, there's a little hint for next week's film. Liam, growing up, I loved this film, and it's safe to say I still do. I mean, it has its moments, but the main actors involved carry this film and just make it fun to watch. But as we go through talking about The Rock today, I have something for that I want you to think about, and I'll ask you at the end. Mm-hmm. What do you think was on the microfilm?
Well, they hinted towards it, didn't they? Or
they hinted to a bit, but I want proper. I want proper theories about what.
Jesus Christ, that's so much pressure. Like that is the point. Like we don't do any preparation. Certainly combined ahead of this podcast, I do make some notes. So that's just falling out the fucking sky. I have no idea, but I'll try and think about it as I'm talking about this movie.
I'll give credit where it's due. I didn't have prep time either because I was out with Dave last night, who does the podcast with us every now and then, and he asked what was on the microfilm. And I thought,
trust Dave. Like, to be honest, I'm just more disappointed you headed up the podcast. Like, how could you not use the best quote of potentially like all of 90s cinema?
I really wanted to, but when we sent out the teaser, everyone that messaged back didn't say The Rock. They came back with
the Sean Connery quote.
Yeah, winners fuck the prom queen. And do you know what? It's a great line, but all of a sudden in my mind it just got a bit overplayed. So I thought,
you cannot overplay that line.
Do it. I know you want to. Do it.
You're the best. Losers always whine about their best. Winners go home and fuck the prom queen. And then even the line from Stanley Goodspeed, Carla was the prom queen. It's like, it's such a badass response as well. It's just, like, it's not just one of the best written lines of 90s cinema. It's the fact that it's delivered by Sean Connery. And you mentioned him already. This film is good. No, it's very good. That's underplaying it. And you mentioned the fact that Michael Bay has had more misses than hits. And I think when I think of Michael Bay and his best movies, it's usually when he's had to, like, add an element of reserve to his directorial style, whether it be budget or whatever else. It's like basically after this, because, he's coming off Bad Boys. Bad Boys was a pretty big hit, but he only had a whatever budget, like mid-range budget. They gave him a slightly bigger budget for this. And obviously, he's working with big stars. And it was only after this film that it suddenly became a Michael Bay film rather than, because this, make no mistake, when this was released in 96, this was a Sean Connery and a Nic Cage film, a Sean Connery film more than anything else, I suppose. But after this, they became Michael Bay films. And as soon as they started giving him blank checks, that's when he could just kind of give in to his poorer instincts of excess, basically. And, it's even like, I think one of his other best films is actually the first Transformers film, when he had a relatively speaking limited budget and had to kind of rein in certain elements of his directorial style. And it made for a more interesting movie. Of course, as soon as that was a hit, the second, third, fourth ones, he's just thrown everything at the screen and they become messier and messier and messier. And it's the same with the first movie he did after this was Pearl Harbor, which I'll defend certain aspects of it, but it's a mess of a fucking film. It becomes a Michael Bay film.
I will correct you there. The next film he did after this was Armageddon.
Sorry, it's Armageddon. I do apologize.
I will say, I only think he's ever done two good films. The Rock and Armageddon. Now, Armageddon is messy.
It's a dumb movie, but I like it. Yeah. The thing is, though, what we forget is that it still felt relatively new. When you think of like Michael Bay stuff, and you get it in this film as well, like the low cut kind of hero shot, totally overdoes the editing. Everything's kind of draped like. When he does weather effects, everything's really dramatic. There's smoke everywhere, there's rain everywhere. And for this movie, what it did, it gave it a unique individual kind of visual signifier, which kind of made it stand out from other 90s films. But when it's like the fourth, fifth, sixth Michael Bay film, you're just tired of it, and it becomes a bit too much, especially that over-edited action. And Armageddon, it's so ludicrous. But back in, what was it, 98 that was released, I think?
98, yeah.
98. A big part of it was just like the special effects and stuff. We hadn't seen anything on that scale before on the cinema screen, because up until quite recently, it just hadn't been possible. So that kind of got you through it. But then, yeah, it does get a bit tight. Even Armageddon, going back to it, is a bit much, I think.
Oh, yeah, it really is. I mean...
But I get why you like it.
Armageddon just becomes Bruce Willis versus an asteroid. But
it's so silly.
It is.
We'll have to do Armageddon at some point.
But all these premises are quite silly, aren't they? Like, 30 years later to grab, again, unofficial James Bond from whatever prison he's in now to bring him back. I mean, the whole story about how he escaped was ridiculous. Because he said one line in there was he spent 3 days just watching the timing. Now, I said this yesterday, again, I was talking to Dave, and I said, so nobody was looking for him for 3 days? And Dave said, well, he probably went back to his cell. I went, oh, actually, that makes sense. But...
Well, no, I took it as in so much that they wouldn't be able to find him because he's in the underbelly of Alcatraz. Yeah, like, you know...
For 3 days, they're still running around. It's not.
Dude, have you seen the underbelly of Alcatraz in this film? There is a fucking Donkey Kong jungle cart ride under fucking Alcatraz in this movie. I mean, the underside of Alcatraz, I mean, it's one of the issues. I mean, there are a few issues in this film. But the cart ride they randomly throw in at the end of the movie, what the fuck is going on in it? Like, it is literally up there with, like, the Temple of Doom cart ride. It's so ridiculous. But because it's a Michael Bay film, and as I said, I think it comes back to that visual style again, because everything is kind of just above every day. Everything's slightly heightened. Like the first few times, obviously, I've watched this film, I've just got to the end of the film and gone, oh yeah, a cart ride. I haven't asked a question. But watching it this time, I was saying, wait, what the fuck? Why is there a roller coaster underneath Alcatraz? It makes no sense. I'm sure someone will try and explain it.
But I loved it as well, right? Because it was, you said what makes no sense. They went through the weird gas, I don't know, whatever he rolled through, and he came out steaming and said, welcome to the Rock.
Oh, the furnace.
Yeah.
Which, why was that on?
Yeah.
Alcatraz has been closed for decades. Why is the furnace on?
When he went through the furnace, he opened it up, and then he said to him, that's a no-no, that's the sewer. Now, to me, wouldn't the sewer be first?
Again, basically what he's done. He's just created a fairground ride underneath Alcatraz.
Yeah,
which is fun both to get in and get out of, and you know they obviously make it into this big spectacle, which is great. But as you say, you mentioned the fact that Michael Biehn, like they have all the build up to them going to Alcatraz, and they have Michael Biehn and his super troopers with him, and you think, oh well, this is going to be a big old shootout. He's secretly like the worst captain in the world. He immediately walks into a trap, and then he just gets his whole team killed. Like he can see, you don't need, Ewan McGregor in Star Wars to explain he's got the higher ground. Like they even explain it in the film. It's like, we're in an elevated position. You guys are all on the deck. We are going to smoke you. Give up. Any captain worth his salt in that situation go, all right, guys, they've got the drop on us. We'll try and make another plan, try and sort this out. But no, he just gets his entire team shot to shit straight away. It's almost similar. So remember, you've seen The Shining, obviously, haven't you?
Yeah.
When he comes, he uses The Shining to get Scatman Crothers to come, via kind of rain, wind, shine. He goes via boat, airplane, train, goes all the way there and immediately just gets stabbed in the back by an axe. You're like, well, what the fuck was the point of all that? That is the Rock equivalent of that.
It's easy for me to say, right, that they died the dumbest way possible. I mean, I'm never going to be, hopefully, in a position where there's people in an elevated position above me, and then somebody moves some rocks, and then everyone just starts firing. But it just seemed really weird that you can tell the difference between some rocks falling and somebody firing a gun. I think the thing is they've used that in 1,000,001 movies, admittedly. Like everyone's in this really tense position. Everyone's just waiting for any sign that the enemy's going to shoot. It's, it's a standoff and that's it. Yeah. And they've used it 1,000,000 times where like something drops, someone's like, oh, somebody's pulled the trigger, somebody's moved, and they just start shooting. As soon as one person starts shooting, everyone else starts shooting. And you've got to remember, Captain Fry and Captain Darrow were there. Like the worst guys in the world. As good as
Hummel's is, and of course, like one of the more interesting aspects of the film is that you have like a really sympathetic bad guy, which I think, again, one of the reasons this is elevated above a lot of movies around the same era is that what he's fighting for, you can fundamentally get behind. If everybody was like Sporlander and Darrow, or what are they called? Sorry, Sporlander and Tony Todd, then the movie would just be a kind of average straight-to-DVD 90s film where, oh, these are just bad guys and that's it.
Yeah.
But like I said, as good as Hummel is, I don't know how he can't see that those two are just wrong-uns. They're like the most evil-looking motherfuckers of all time.
I mean, Tony Todd always looks evil anyway, but when you see...
I think Gregory Sporlander looks worse.
Yeah, when you see Captain Fried, Gregory Sporlander, as soon as he comes in, you're thinking, well, this dude's going to turn against every fucking one. Like,
yeah, he walks into the room, you're like, he looks like the most evil fuck of all time. And then you look at his mate and go, oh, he's the candy man, for fuck's sake. Of course he's evil. This is ridiculous. But yeah.
To the point, when he's jumping right to the end, when he's got Nicolas Cage, Stanley Goodspeed on the floor, and he goes, I want to choke my $1 million out of you. And I'm like, I don't know if you're going to get $1 million out of him. Maybe just give up. Maybe just leave. I
just think he's just eager to kill. He's a horrible character in the best possible way, admittedly. But yeah, they are real rotters. But I mean, you mentioned the fact about the whole. I mean, we're going to have to deal with it. The fact that Connery is potentially here playing James Bond.
The timeline works, doesn't it? Because the last film was probably the 60s for Sean Connery.
71. I've actually got down some of the facts here if you want me to go through them.
I'll go for it.
So basically, if you're not aware, a lot of people have argued, and there's one video in particular, which we'll share on the website after, which makes a really strong argument for Mason actually being James Bond. So the first one, the most obvious issue is John Mason isn't James Bond in terms of his name. But that isn't really an issue because obviously he would use an alias if captured and would be disavowed by the UK government. So that all adds up. Also, some believe that like each Bond takes the name as an alias, so none of them are actually called James Bond. But that's been disproved loads of times. That's absolute bullshit. So Bond escapes Alcatraz in Dr. No, released the year he was captured in this in 1962, and he escaped in time to be in Russia, in time for Russia with Love in 1963. So it adds up in terms of his James Bond's timeline. He wasn't arrested initially for the microfilm, which we've already mentioned, as the JFK was assassinated the year he escaped, not before. So it does allude to the film being stolen after the death of J. Edgar Hoover in 1972, which means that he could have been arrested the year after his final Bond performance in Diamonds Are Forever in 1971. So that adds up. If nothing else, the performances actually feel very similar. Like, would his performance or characterization need to change at all if you just called him James Bond? I don't think you do. Admittedly, Sean Connery does often just play Sean Connery, but you know, if you just said he's James Bond and no one knows who James Bond is except for the viewer, you get the exact same performance. There's references to him being trained by British intelligence, which is a bit on the nose. He's also, and I always found this really interesting, he's referred to as being English in the movie rather than Scottish. Now, there is no reason for that because Sean Connery is clearly Scottish, unless you're doing a nod to the fact that he's James Bond. I
say that what is he called? The guy that fights him at the end says,
he says, "Oh, did I tell you my parents are Irish?" And he's like, "You English piece of shit." Yeah, he calls him an English prick.
English prick. Okay.
Yeah. That feels so on the nose to me that he goes out of his way to do that. His daughter was conceived after one night stand. Classic Bond, if ever there was.
With Maya Angelou.
Yeah. Okay, maybe not classic Bond. I thought this was an interesting one, bit of a stretch, but it's a weird nod. Hummel, who would have been serving in Vietnam during the events of You Only Live Twice, when Bond fakes his own death and it becomes international news. You actually see it on the newspaper in the movie that a naval commander died. Is something that he would have been potentially sympathetic towards. So when they meet, Hummel asks for the name and rank and calls him a sailor. Yeah. And Mason gives him a confused look and claims he was in the army. It's like all very knowing, as if, you know, again, it just feels like a nod to that. And there is actually loads more. We won't go through the entire list, but that video in particular makes a really strong argument. And I'm not sure if it's just I want to believe that he's James Bond, but one thing I couldn't find, and maybe you came across it, did anyone ever actually ask Sean Connery if he was playing Mason as Bond? Like, regardless of whether it was official or not, did anyone just say, listen, when you were making this film, were you playing it as if you were James Bond? And I'm not sure if I can't believe no one fucking asked him that.
No, I've never come across any of the interviews where they, like I said, I looked for it to see if there was any hints that he thought himself he was playing Bond, but I didn't come across anything.
I just love the idea that they've had that conversation. He said, don't bring it up, but you just play this as Bond, because it feels like it could be.
He probably read the script and just thought, you know what, this is closer to my Bond performance than anything else.
Yeah, but then, you know, you could have like the Hunt for Red October. He still sounds like fucking James Bond in that, because James Bond just sounds like Sean Connery.
Or
and just to be clear, or Highlander, yeah. It just doesn't matter. I've lived up in Scotland for 15 years, by the way, and just to be clear, nobody sounds like Sean Connery. Like, and not just Scotland, he's from Edinburgh, that's where I live. Nobody speaks like Sean Connery. It's so bizarre. The only person with a Sean Connery accent is Sean fucking Connery. It's insane. But to bring it back to the movie, how good is he in this film? Like,
yeah, he's great. I mean, to be fair, we say it a lot of times, and we'll probably get to it in facts as well, like who was considered for this part or this part or this part. But without Sean Connery, I don't think, like, Sean Connery elevates this film to another level. Like, even the things, like when he's talking to Hummel and they're having that little sympathetic talk with everyone pointing guns at him, he goes, well, personally, I think you're a fucking idiot, General, sir.
And he just pulls it off, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And that's what he brings to this film. Like, and make no mistake, this film has got an amazing cast. But in a movie full of stars, he shines bright as that. That sounds so cheesy, but he is so clearly the mega star in this movie. Like, every time he's on screen, you're just immediately drawn to him. And I think the most amazing thing, because he's so no kind of nonsense, you know, you imagine him being both an actor and as a person. And you have Nicolas Cage, and he's so esoteric that they shouldn't have this amazing chemistry on screen, but they absolutely do. And that's fundamentally, you mentioned it in the intro, what makes this movie really stand out. Yes, like the Bay direction, and make no mistake, for all the criticisms of Bay, that guy can direct an action sequence. And we'll get to the chase sequence in San Francisco in particular. But even if you look at his weaker films, like we mentioned Pearl Harbor earlier, there is like a 15-minute, the actual bombing of Pearl Harbor is a technical masterpiece. Make no mistake. The rest of the film, you can tear to shreds. But when he's just doing pure action, there are few directors who can live with him. You know, I know he over-edits things, but
that whether he's doing massive action set pieces or the smaller ones, you've already said, like, you got the chase scene in San Francisco, but then you have the morgue gunfight. You know, those action scenes, they're very Michael Bay, and they're very I'm not going to deny anything. I'm not a huge fan of Michael Bay, but when Michael Bay does action right, I think when Michael Bay does action, I think he does the action part right.
100%.
But the problem is he then needs somebody to take the reins and carry the film further, because Michael Bay, all in all, I'm not a fan of his direction. But like I said, I've always had a soft spot for The Rock. I always will. Rewatching it, I never, and I don't know why I never picked up on this before. Fuck me, Stanley Goodspeed doesn't shut up, does he?
No, but that's part of his.
No, I know, but my God, even while he's having sex with his ridiculously hot fiance, she's in pigtails, she's riding him, and he's going on about, I don't know, some sort of gentle persuasion or whatever it is.
He really is going
enjoy
for
the
it.
moment.
Well, my biggest, and again, I've kind of got like a list of issues which I kind of lined up, which I wrote for the film, and one of them was just stopping mid-coitus with her. It's like he just kind of just stopped. Like, come on, dudes, I don't care how important this is. Finish the job at hand, for the love of God.
After he thrusts into her a couple of times, when he says, "This isn't happening," like he's hitting her cervix at that point.
Well, yeah, at that point, you just like finish the job, mate, for the love of God. But anyway, yes, he does talk a bit too much, but. And you've got to remember, this is coming off like the 80s. So, you know, the 80s, you've got all the kind of monosyllabic kind of action heroes, your Schwarzeneggers, your Stallones and stuff. And obviously they were looking for something different in the 90s, because, you know, the early 90s are really when they started trading off, you know, when the flops started coming in and they weren't having the same impact anymore. And I think, you know, audiences were looking for something a bit different. But even then, I don't think anybody was expecting it to be as different as Nicolas Cage. Yeah. Like, you know, I mentioned the fact that his performance is esoteric compared to, you know, again, your traditional action stars like your Stallones and your Schwarzeneggers. It's so left field that I'm not sure if it was Bay's choice, but you've got to give him credit for going with Nic Cage, who didn't have anything at this point to back it up into, when you looked at the other movies he's making around the same time, there was no suggestion that, he's going to be the next big action hero. And I guess they kind of got away with it by making him not your traditional action hero. Like, he's not supposed to be there. That's the whole point of his character, isn't it?
Prior, he did Leave in Las Vegas and Kiss of Death. He had Trapped in Paradise with, what was his name? Garth from Wayne's World. Dana. Yeah. And
Dana Carvey.
Dana Carvey and fucking John Lovitz.
Yeah.
Which Trapped in Paradise I actually liked, but I think it flopped like fuck.
Yeah.
So he didn't do.
Well, I remembered him like most specifically growing up. I remember him from stuff like Raising Arizona.
Yeah, Raising Arizona, Red Rock West. I can never.
Yeah, like really, like straight, like the kind of films you would expect a young Nicolas Cage to be in, where he's really swinging for the fences. And in fairness to him, and I think what actually makes it work is that he just doesn't tone it down for this. He's just like, well, this is my opportunity. I'm going to turn it up a notch. And I think that's what makes it so interesting. And believe me, I think modern action could totally do with a Nicolas Cage, because you look at modern action, even a Michael Bay to some extent. Like, when I think of modern action films, sadly, what I think of is the absolute shite that you see on Netflix. And they're all like, all it does is remind you that most action films are super forgettable. And then on top of that, they've all got a bunch of stars who aren't really stars. They've been made stars by franchises. And they're fine. I'm not here to shit on the Chris's and all that jazz. They're perfectly good actors. But, I don't think they can carry a movie in the same way that someone like Nicolas Cage can, or certainly Sean Connery. And I think it just kind of reminds you that we haven't actually got that many traditional movie stars in 2023, which is a bit of a shame.
We've said it as well, didn't we? We said we're going to do the Beige Volvo trilogy. We've already said it. And you can see his progression through the...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like, because he is not the action hero. Make no bones about it. The action hero in The Rock is Connery.
Oh, Sean Connery. Yeah, it's Bond, for sure.
He is the bumbling sidekick at no point. Like, that's where it is. Then when you get Connery, that's when, obviously, he becomes...
Connery is so silly.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But he becomes then like the prototype, the action.
Yeah.
And then it tones down again a bit in Face Off because... Well,
they just make it weirder and weirder.
Yeah. But what I mean, but it's his progression through them that, although they're tenuously linked by a beige Volvo, there's nothing to do with these films. But you can see just his progression go in through these action films. Because, he gets a little bit of an action set piece in this, but he doesn't do much. He's basically the trailer in all of these films. He's just following along.
Yeah, well, it's like this one, they're obviously like, well, we're getting Nicolas Cage in, but we almost need the backup of Sean Connery as a believable action hero, because we're like, is anyone going to buy into the fact that Nicolas Cage in 1996 is a believable action hero? Of course. They come out the other side, the movie's a massive hit, people love Nicolas Cage. So like you said, the second film, they're like, well, let's go more traditional. Now, when I say traditional, it's only as traditional as Nicolas Cage allows, because in one respect, he's playing it as straight and narrow as you could imagine with Con Air. But at the same time, his performance is so bizarre that, again, I would argue it elevates an otherwise potentially po-faced movie, which it does here. And then, because that one's a big hit, I think once you get to Face Off, they were just like, you can do whatever you want, mate. And, we'll get to Face Off in a couple of weeks, and he does whatever the fuck he wants. But it makes the movie so much more interesting than it would have other been. And again, it comes back to that, if Sean Connery was just playing off like an everyday whatever dude, like who was the guy who was working with Nicolas Cage at the start of the film? The other chemical weapons expert.
Isherman. Oh, fucking Isherman. Can we talk about that?
Well, we'll get to Isherman now. This is my excuse to kind of rag on Isherman. But imagine if he was with Connery for the whole film. It's just like, and he was just your usual, like, oh, I'm scared to be here. I'm a bumbling scientist. It wouldn't have worked.
No.
And it comes back to that quote again. Like, my favorite quote, the winners go home and fuck the prom queen. And in that moment, it cuts to Cage and he's like, Carla was the prom queen. And that's his like, I've become an action hero moment.
Yeah.
And the difference is like, you buy into it. You buy into him as this bumbling idiot. And then 2 minutes later, when he suddenly decides I'm an action hero, you're like, I fucking buy that as well because you're Nic Cage.
But it changes as well, doesn't it? I know we want to rag on Isherman. We will get to him in a sec. But
oh, yeah.
It changes as well because he does that whole Carla was a prom queen, cocks his gun, goes and has a nice little morgue fight. And then after that because even during the fight, he is still won't shut up. Shoot the people, not the rocket. Shoot the people, not the rocket. And then when he's about to defuse him, And he goes, "You've been around a lot of dead bodies. Is that natural? What, the foot thing? Yeah, the foot thing. It happens. What do you want me to do? Kill him again?" But you get that little scene, and then no sooner then, he opens up the rocket, sees the VX poison. Sorry, I can only say it like Danny Nucci. VX poison gas. Like,
VX poison gas.
When he and then he goes, "Ooh, like a elegant string of pearls configuration. It's almost beautiful if it weren't deadly." Like, shut the fuck up for a minute and defuse the fucking bomb.
I think anyone else, I would totally agree. Where he just keeps rattling on, but he's so compelling in this film. Admittedly, I am a massive Nic Cage fan. Like, I know a lot of people feel very differently about him. I still think he can be terrible. Don't get me wrong. Nobody's got a wider range of being truly exceptional and genuinely terrible as Nic Cage. But Nic Cage has elevated otherwise terrible movies. And he's made movies which, like this, could have been a bit whatever, could have been a bit po-faced. He makes them more interesting just by the fact that nobody else is quite like Nicolas Cage. Nobody, like, you know, he said like his acting style is much more performance-based. It was like, he was like after the 70s, and obviously you get people like Jesus Christ, like Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, they come in and it's a much more, I know it changed with Al Pacino, but I'm talking about the 70s and early 80s now, became a much more naturalistic approach. And that was like, from then on, that was the de facto approach to acting, this kind of much more naturalistic approach to the art. Whereas Nicolas Cage is like, no, mine is performance-based. And because nobody else is doing it, he stands out like a sore thumb. But like I said, even if he's bad, he's never anything less than interesting. But no, yes, let's get to that fucking scientist.
Just before we get to him, I mean, it helps that he has 107 credits, so he gets to do every style of acting he wants to do.
Oh, and yeah, and make no mistake, as much as I'm a Nicolas Cage apologist, defender, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of rubbish in there. There is a lot of phoned-in performances, but when he is good, he is legitimately top tier.
What was that one where he could see like 7 seconds into the future or something, and he had the weird...
that was a weird film. I went to see that in the cinema. That was insane, that film. What the hell was it called? But Next. Yeah.
That, he had Next. He had Knowing, which was about like...
Knowing, sorry, that's the film I was thinking of. Yeah. Knowing is bananas.
And he had Bangkok Dangerous, right? And
yeah, I watched that in the cinema too.
Where you have the Beige Volvo trilogy, all I can remember about those three films is the hairstyle.
Yeah, he had a pretty ropey hairstyle for a while, but as I say, it ups, downs, peaks and troughs. But what you can't argue is like, this is legitimately a top tier action movie run. Like this, the Beige Volvo trilogy, whatever you want to call it, in terms of like back to back, going directly from The Rock to Con Air to Face Off, is an unbelievable trilogy of movies, and in many ways defined 90s action movies. And I'd argue that, like, I'm not going to say The Rock is the best action movie in the 90s. You know, we are talking about a decade which had Terminator 2 in it, which, let's be clear, is the best action movie of the decade. But The Rock is in the conversation in the same way as ludicrous as they are. Con Air is in the conversation. Face Off is in the conversation. And it's just, you know, he defined a decade's worth of action in 3 movies. It's absolutely insane for somebody who had really, let's be clear, no business being in action movies.
Yeah. Right, let's do it. And we keep calling him Isherman because we're pricks. His name was Isherwood.
Isherwood. But I don't care. He's terrible. I mean, we are talking about the most dangerous. I mean, he's the worst chemicals weapons expert ever. Yeah. I mean, he's never seen the needle before. He's playing with the doll. Like, surely that's like step 1 in the playbook. Don't play with the fucking toys, which might be booby traps.
Even as a trainee, because he says this is trainee Marvin Isherwood. Even as a trainee, wouldn't he know the basics before going in to the room? Like, the basics are, don't fuck around with the suspected chemical weapons in the box.
Yeah, and I know what he's doing with the needle. Like, the whole point is he's telling everyone else in the movie that the needle is important. Like, has a needle ever been more destined to be stuck in someone's chest than that needle? And in fairness, it is the best needle of all time. Like, it's more like a flip knife. Like, when Nicolas Cage has it at the end of the film, and he obviously inevitably has to stick it in his chest. Yeah. He holds it like a samurai sword and presses a button and it shoots out. You're like, this is, in fairness, that is a cool fucking needle.
And that is a good 6 inches long, that fucking needle.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to stick that in my chest either. But yes, he does everything wrong in that room where possible. And then, of course, Nicolas Cage is still trying to defuse the bomb. You've got all the water coming down. And everybody is just thinking about Isherwood. Is that his name? instead of Nicolas Cage, like there's like 15 seconds left, and they're like, "Oh, you've got to stick that in your chest and stuff." He clearly can't help. How about you forget about him and keep the emphasis on Nicolas Cage and trying to defuse the bomb? Because if he doesn't defuse the bomb, it doesn't matter what he does with the needle. Everyone dies regardless.
Well, they were, weren't they? Because they were going, stick that in your heart and then defuse the bomb. And they were shouting at Stanley to do that. They were like, and you just, in between it, you got Ishwood in the middle going, you want me to stick this in my heart? Are you fucking nuts? Like, dude, you're moaning, you're dying, just do it. Talking about the needle, I did love at the end where you said where he did the little flip thing, and you still had the point where he was trying to guess where his heart was. I like that. Instead of the traditional action moment where he just sticks it in him and then
he's like, "Where the fuck is my heart?" Yeah, it's just slightly left.
He moves his hand a little bit before he does it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes no sense. But the great thing about this movie and one of its greatest successes is the VX poison gas, because by that point in the film, you don't even question the fact that he sticks the needle in his chest, because you're like, you totally would. Like, all right, just be clear, the design of the VX poison gas, and you alluded to it earlier, like the pearl configuration, is the worst design ever. Why it's so easy to fall off, why it's so easy to break, a substance so dangerous, I can't even imagine what the reasoning is. But it totally works for the movie. And they establish it so successfully with the raid at the army base at the start of the film, which is pure Michael Bay, by the way. The rain is falling so ridiculously heavily. There's smoke everywhere. It's got all the military porn that Michael Bay absolutely adores. But that sequence, and I always remember it as one of the more kind of memorable sequences of 90s cinema, is when the dude gets locked in the room. The VX gas, of course, falls off because the rocket just, the back of it just opens up for no apparent reason. And once that it cracks in the room and the guy's locked in there and his face basically melts off, you're like, holy shit, this stuff is for real. It's the whole thing about the best cinema out there. Show, don't tell. Don't describe to me what VX gas does. Show me what VX gas does. And for the rest of the film, you're just like, okay, I'm fully up to speed on this. If VX gas is released, not only does everyone die, everybody melts to death. It's horrifying. And it does lead. This movie has secretly a lot of actually really good deaths. There's like the air conditioning unit death in the fight. Like, that is horrible. Like, when it falls, it sounds like a fucking safe dropping on its face. There's the leg on fire and then drowns. I was like, that's a rough way to go. There's a really solid neck break by Mason. And obviously the big famous one at the end, the rocket into dude falls into a pole. But nothing compares to the VX gas in the mouth punch combo. I remember seeing that in the cinema when I was younger and being, fuck, that is so horrible. But it couldn't happen to a nicer guy, at least.
It gives a whole new meaning to glass jaw as well, isn't it?
Oh, it's horrible.
No more does he put it in, and then he socks in one, and you start spitting.
It works on so many levels, because just the idea of somebody punching a glass ball that's in your mouth is already horrible, and the use of audio is so impressive. But then you get the reaction where he's like holding his face, and it becomes ostensibly a horror movie for like a minute and a half. It is so fucking horrible, and one of the most memorable deaths in 90s cinema.
Sticking to that ending, right? I want to play a game of Did You Recognize? Okay, so there's two I recognize. That the first one is probably going to be a bit obvious. But just as he, again, sticks the 6-inch needle into his heart and he launches green smoke, and then the pilot drops the bomb on him and he randomly falls in the water when he should have been incinerated.
Yeah, he really should have been.
Did you recognize the pilot?
No.
James Caviezel.
Is it really?
Yeah.
What's happened to James Caviezel? I mean, he's probably doing some he's pretty into Jesus, isn't he? I don't know. He's probably doing something quite intense, but never mind.
Yeah, but no, it was right, because you hear the voice and I go, that sounds like James Caviezel, because I've started rewatching Persons of Interest again. So
I think it would say Passion of the Christ.
Passion of the Christ.
Fucking hell. I mean, I saw that in the cinema, and it is actually a really well-made movie, but it is rough to watch. Yeah. I will never rewatch that movie.
And then when he opens his visor and looks down and goes, "Oh, I didn't kill any of the hostages. It's fine." You're like, "Oh, that's James Caviezel." So
cool. And maybe he had his moment in probably the best scene in the movie. Yeah. Once we get to favorite scenes, I think that probably is the best one.
So I said that one was probably a bit easier. You're never going to guess the other one. Did you recognize one of the Navy SEALs? Not Michael Biehn.
I recognize Michael Biehn. Yeah.
Marshall R. Teague.
Nope.
Nope. That's the dude from fucking Roadhouse that gets his throat ripped out.
Oh, is that really? Yeah, that is a deep cut.
Yeah.
The thing is, they're not even around long enough to be interesting, and maybe that's like they did that purposely. Like you think, like like it takes them a while to actually get to Alcatraz in this film, and a big part of it is building up that team. You're like, oh, well, it's going to be a big old shootout, and you've got like the team infiltrating Alcatraz. But in a film which is 2 hours 20 minutes long, it's not a short film. They get rid of those guys so quickly. It has to be intentional.
But fucking hell, we didn't say. You said 2 hour and 20-minute film. You don't even get to Alcatraz until like an hour and 10 into it.
But it never feels slow, and it's weird because I know that sequence is arguably the big action sequence where the plane comes in and you get the hero, like the platoon kind of sacrifice scene where he's got like he's waving the flares and stuff, and that comes just after the punch, which is all it's an amazing 4 minutes of cinema. But the true Bay moment in this film is undoubtedly not on Alcatraz; it's in San Francisco.
It's San Francisco Humvee chasing, isn't it?
It's and it really is Bay to the max. We mentioned the fact that the military porn on screen. It's got everything you would expect from a Michael Bay sequence. Like it's even got like a fuck hippies moments. Like there's a VW covered in flowers, torn to pieces by a Humvee. It's not subtle in any way. Yeah. There's one drop lamppost which kills 6 cars. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but there's no reason for that tram to explode. None whatsoever. And when it explodes, it goes like 30 foot up in the air, but it looks amazing and it's so well shot. And again, one of the things you would have now is that would be done with CG. Like I'm trying to think of a comparison. Shang-Chi in that's shot in San Francisco. That sequence is really cool. Like the fight choreography is amazing. But it has that issue that it's CG. They're not really on a tram. The tram's not really in San Francisco, so you just don't buy into it in the same way. When you see that tram slide down the street and explode, you're like, no, they blew a fucking tram up in the middle of San Francisco. And it just has that impact that you just don't get with CG.
I mean, 2 things about that chase scene. The first one being that he was hitting everything: the water truck, the cars, the lamp.
To the point where they even had to mention it, didn't they? You see, this guy's hitting everything. What the fuck?
All you were missing was the 2 guys carrying the pane of glass.
It literally did hit every other chase trope, didn't it? It was absolutely absurd. But
in cinema, I've never understood what job you have. You have to carry a pane of glass.
I'd love to be that guy in a Michael Bay movie. But again, this is a movie of great lines, and arguably right up there with Go and Fuck the Prom Queen is the dude, you just fucked up your Ferrari. It's not my, like, they throw in those moments throughout the film where Nicolas Cage, like you said, he's bumbling and stuff, but he can still deliver those one-line. Like that is a legit action hero one-liner, and he delivers that really early in the movie, which actually I was like, I think he's got it in him. I think and he's already got the cool name. Stanley Goodspeed is a fucking dope name.
It is a good name.
It's a weird name because it should, like, if you just said his name is Stanley, you'd be fucking Stanley. That's terrible. But they keep going out of their way to refer to him as Stanley Goodspeed, and for some odd reason, combined, it becomes an amazing name.
Yeah. The second thing I wanted to mention was about that chase scene was when you said the what do you call it, the tram, when it was sliding down, you got Nicolas Cage running away. Well, no, you don't have Nicolas Cage running away. They could have found a stunt double that looked like him, couldn't they?
There are a couple of moments. There's one moment I think where I can't remember which fight sequence is, but it's Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage. Oh, I think it's the bit where they're dropping the bombs on them. They're like underneath them and they're dropping like homemade. They look like homemade bombs, despite the fact that they're military. And there's one bit,
a jerry can rigged with C4. I mean, come on, dude.
It's ridiculous. But there's like one bit where all they're doing is running, and then there's like Sean Connery's like, I'm not running. And so it's just like an old dude who looks a tiny bit like Sean Connery, but that is one of the issues with 90s action films, and certainly 80s, is that every so often you have to put up with the dodgy stunt double, and they could have done a bit better in this film.
I mean, they had a guy that was taller than Nic Cage, didn't have the same hairstyle. They didn't even try. They just put a dude in a suit and say, run away from that tram.
Yeah, that's about it. It's like, no one will notice. They're all looking at the tram. It's like, all right, fair enough. We'll just go with it. But yeah, that sequence is pure Bay in the best possible way. It's so well put together. You get some of the best directors out there. I always think of Christopher Nolan, and especially the first Batman film. Like, I love Batman Begins, but the action sequences in that film just aren't up to much. And you're like, oh, can't you just bring in like Bay just to do the action sequences, and maybe just get some? You want a different editor. You want Bay to shoot it. You want someone else to edit it, to tone down the editing, and then you want someone else to basically direct the rest of the film. Because, as you said, I don't actually like very many Michael Bay films, but this is an outlier. Although he started off so well, because I don't think you're a fan, are you? But I really like the first Bad Boys film.
No,
which got on this.
No, I don't like any of the Bad Boys films, but I mean, I could probably rewatch the first one and be all right with it, but I mean, I'm not going to.
Well, Bad Boys 2 is arguably the perfect example of a Bay movie, where it's a largely terrible movie, but cut together with like 3 legitimately exceptional set pieces.
And isn't Bad Boys 2 where he developed his filming style of showing the heroes while he's running around them with a camera?
Well, no, you get that in The Rock. Like, that's the first time I ever remember seeing it. It was when Nicolas Cage gets out of the Ferrari. He does the classic Michael Bay hero shot. The camera pans below him as he just kind of looks up into the distance. And the only differences in this film is that I think you only get one of the classic Michael Bay hero shots. Whereas again, once you get to like Bad Boys 2 and stuff, he's doing like 7 or 8 a movie. It's like every time he can, it's like, well, let's do another hero shot. Or it started to become slightly more perverted as he went on. Like, he was suddenly like shooting, and these were in like Transformers films. There was one shot, it was like shot between a girl's legs. Like, dude, I think that girl's like 16. It's like, fucking hell, Michael Bay, this is getting a little bit gross. Or maybe I'm just getting older. I don't know. But yeah, loads of issues with Michael Bay films, but not with this one. This one's a belter.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, it has its dumbass moments, but all in all, it is a good film. It is. I've already said it. It's a fun watch. It was really, the action sequences still hold up. I will give it that.
100%.
I don't. We haven't really talked about it much. I don't understand Hummel's whole plan. Like,
I don't mind Hummel's plan.
He steals the VX poison gas.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He's going to kill Americans. Like,
no, he's not. No. That's the point.
No, but that's the point.
That's what he's selling. Yeah, okay.
That's what. But he's selling. He's going to kill Americans to make up for Americans dying overseas. Like, that whole plan seems a bit stupid.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. He's not going to. I think he's at his wit's end. Like, the idea is that Hummels has tried.
I know he's not going to. We know he's not going to. But the people that he's threatening don't know that.
Well, but that's his point. Like, he's willing to throw his own reputation. Like, he mentioned it in the movie. His belief is that he'll be seen as a revolutionary after his death. Like, people will look back and go, "Oh, well, Hummels went to extremes to get the right things for the American military and be seen as a hero." Because basically, in his idea is that he steals as a threat. They get the money out to the soldiers, and then he gives himself up. Sorry, they all go off to that island, don't they? So he doesn't have to explain himself.
In his mind, he was never going to that island. He was going to pay for his crimes. He just
maybe
meant to be sick. Because I don't think he would have taken the money and run. I think he would have just stood his ground. Maybe. Sympathetic part of him, like when he wants the kids to go home and stuff like that. So he sends the kids. So I honestly don't. And I appreciate that. He loves his men. He wants to look after them. So much so that he puts him in a dangerous situation. It's a bit counterproductive.
Yeah, but like you said, I think for the film, and I think it is important that you did have a sympathetic bad guy, and it did make you think it's like, and so much of the movie is driven by that, is the idea that Hummels isn't a bad guy. It's like he's a good guy who's being pushed to an extreme, who's maybe had a bad idea.
Which is why I understand why you had to bring in Tony Todd and
100%. Yeah, you need it for when things aren't going well.
Angry dude. He was the guy as well when we did True Romance a couple of weeks ago. He was the guy I called out. He was in.
Oh, you mean Gregory Spoilers?
Yeah. He was the guy in True Romance that was talking about Elvis with Christian Slater when they were.
Yeah. He's got one of those particular, like, he's got such a unique face, and the thing is, he can do pleasant as well. Like, I always remember him as the I don't know, the food hygienist from Friends, the one who ends up like dating Phoebe.
Yeah.
And it's like, he's quite sweet in that, but they're played like, in terms of his range, he is horrible in this. And like you said, like, you need them, but you need them not to be the leads. And even having David Morse as Tom Baxter, essentially Hummel's number 2, I think he adds a bit of depth to it, because he's kind of like, he doesn't quite know where to go, because obviously his, I guess, he works with Hummel's, his kind of allegiances lie with Hummel. But at the same time, he wants to get paid. And he's like, I don't want to get arrested. He's not quite as committed as Hummel. He's like, I want the money and I want to escape. That was the whole idea. It's like, we're doing this for a good cause. Almost like he's that kind of conflicted, like in his head. He's like, oh, I'm doing this for the right reason. But really what he's doing is he's doing it for the money. And, as far right as Captain Fry and Captain Dow are, in terms of they are, and you get it all the way through the film, they are looking for an excuse to shoot that missile. Like, they're just wrongings. Yeah. Like, Tom Baxter, he's on the fence, and then you got Hummels at the other end. But it adds just that bit of depth rather than the just kind of like faceless villain. It's like, oh, he's just a bad guy. So, it adds just, I think, like, a bit of additional drama to all of the proceedings throughout the film. But, for all my talk about that, it really is just Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage that make the film for me.
Right. Before we move on to favorite scenes, loves and hates, and everything else, is there anything you want to talk about the film before you tell me what you think is on the microfilm?
Oh, fuck, I haven't given that a second thought. No, let's go straight to favorite scenes, so I'd have to think about it. So
I still want to know what's on the microfilm. What you
right now?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, they mention a few things. Like, Womack tells Paxton about the fact that there were aliens at Roswell on it and the JFK assassination. And the biggest surprise, that Paxton doesn't bat a fucking eyelid to that. Like, he should, like, they're in a busy room and it's just like, oh, yeah, so aliens definitely exist. We know who JFK was really assassinated by. And Paxton's like, yeah, sure, whatever, cool. Like, those are the two obvious big ones, aren't they? I don't know. Maybe there's something about the fact that Hitler really did live at the end of World War II and moved down to Brazil, maybe, and they made a deal with the US government. I don't know. But the
one I got right. The one I was thinking about. That was really good, the Hitler one, right? Because mine's stupid. The reason why Womack won't let it go is because the microfilm probably has him in stockings and suspenders somewhere. Just,
I mean, that Mason really did hate Womack, so I wouldn't be surprised if. And he does seem to be taking it very personally. So as much in terms of on a national security level, like the whole doing a deal with Hitler after World War II makes sense. I actually think having Womack in suspenders getting pegged probably makes more sense for the narrative of the film, because Womack has a real fucking issue with Mason.
Hates Mason. Like, Mason's been locked up for 30 years and you're holding one hell of a fucking grudge. Like, there is something on that microfilm that is linked to that dude. And yeah, so I think stocking suspenders and getting pegged is probably up there.
I think that probably is up there. Although that brings me to another one of my issues with the film is I'm not sure if this film needs both Womack and Paxton. It's just one of those kind of like ancillary characters where I'm like, I just feel like Womack could be both of those, or Paxton could be both of those. I just don't know why they need to have. Maybe every so often they just think, usually it's something you don't even think about. I'll be like, we need somebody to just deliver some information, and we basically need them to be talking to someone and for it to make sense.
I think because
we need an exposition dump, and we need somebody there to receive it, basically.
You had Womack being so angry at Mason to the point where there wasn't going to be the forgiveness at the end, knowing Mason's really alive. So you had to have then Paxton, who is a little bit, calmer in those situations where he's like, he knows Mason's alive and he's all right with it. Mason did a job. Whereas Womack, if he knew Mason was alive, he'd have everyone looking for him right now. So I don't think you could have the same character.
Yeah, maybe.
Be so angry with this dude and then all of a sudden go, oh yeah, okay, he's alive, it's fine. So,
see, it's so unreasonable. You were saying all that, and all I was thinking was the end of the film when Stanley Goodspeed goes to the church. He gets the microfilm, opens up in the car. And he's like, "Hey, honey, do you want to know if Womack got fisted?" That's all I can imagine. It's a very different end to this film.
Also, when did Mason have time? When did Mason have time to find a scrap of paper and write St. Michael's Church, front pew, right leg, hollow? Like, did he always have, like, was that
in his pocket ready?
His prison pocket. Like, he kept it in his prison pocket.
Maybe he did. He did. Well, I don't know. I was too busy questioning the fact that, like, Nicolas Cage and his, his newly his new wife were driving around in that bullshit car. I'm just like, come on, guys, you're such a bunch of fucking hipsters.
Volvo.
But it looks terrible. Like, why would you? Doesn't matter. I guess if it links the films, I'll accept it. Not
getting away anything in that car. Also, when did they have a dog? Did they have a dog at the beginning?
I don't think so. Where was his apartment? Was it in Washington?
It was San Francisco, wasn't it?
No, he didn't. He had to travel to, because remember, there's that whole bullshit thing where he takes entirely too long to tell his girlfriend that there's like she shouldn't come to San Francisco. Like, again, you obviously want her there because it adds a personal sense of drama for him. But surely, as soon as he knows that you've got somebody like, you know, a legit threat pointing at VX gas at San Francisco, he would make more of an effort to phone up his girlfriend and say, do not come to San Francisco. I don't know why she's like, if your husband or husband to be, whatever, is a chemical weapons expert and he's like, no, this is not a drill. Do not come to San Francisco. She's like, no, go fuck yourself. I'm coming anyway. Oh, she deserved to die.
The other thing is, when did he have time to go to the hotel, unpack, put $200 in the Bible, just so he could tell Mason at the end, oh, if you manage to make it back to San Francisco, go to this hotel, room 6. You know,
oh yeah,
$200
makes no sense.
Like, he got out of the car, spoke to them, told them about VX poison gas, and it's the same as champagne. Which Then the next thing you know, they're interviewing Mason to. When did he have time to go and unpack and put $200 in the Bible?
Yeah, that seems very strange. And why would he even do it? Like at that point of the film, it makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, if you get it, find Carla, and Carla can help you.
Yeah.
You seem to be adept at finding people. You found your daughter, even though nobody else could find her.
His daughter's the girl from Mallrats, isn't she?
Claire Filani, yeah.
Yeah. You said that with a face then. Are you a Claire Filani fan by any chance?
I like Claire Filani.
Yeah, I thought you might be. You know, when somebody just, Claire Filani. It's just like, I didn't realize you were quite so. It's just like a Liv Tyler moment for me last week.
I'm a fan of Claire Filani. Maybe not in Meet Joe Black. I like she was
but that film was fucking dog shit. That film was so terrible.
Ben Stiller's love interest in Mystery Men.
Oh yeah. She's good in that.
Yeah.
That's another film we should probably do, actually. I'd be really interested to go back and see how that film's held up. Especially after like 101, superhero films. Does it have more of an impact? I don't know. Anyway, favorite scenes. The most famous one is probably the shower sequence, which we'll get to in video games, obviously. But really, the answer is the finale.
Obviously, like everyone else has thought about that.
Oh no, most people who played a video game are aware of Call of Duty, like the impact of Bay. I'll get to it in a minute.
Yeah.
But really, see, I'm saying that now. I'm like, the chase through San Francisco is amazing, but it is the one that always stands out. And when I think of The Rock, I think the finale with the VX punch to the face, the platoon sacrifice pose, and the money shot of Jim Caviezel, which I didn't know, shooting the missile at Alcatraz is very hard to beat. The way like the plane kind of shoots up at the end and you get Alcatraz blowing up, it's all very cool. And of course, like one of the cool things about like going back and watching this film, this is the first time I've gone back to rewatch this, having been not only to San Francisco but also to Alcatraz. And one of the things I was going to. I do apologize. I did miss it. That is actually one of my issues with the film. The Alcatraz tour is bullshit. It's an audio tour when you go there. But admittedly, that wouldn't be very cinematic. I was not locked in a cell. They just don't do that. Or maybe they did it in '96 and they just kind of stopped doing it after this film. But the tour was a lot more chilled out than what's shown on screen. But it was cool seeing these things again. It's always unique, isn't it? Like when you go back and like, oh, well, I actually remember being there, like when you know the tram goes over and stuff like that. But yeah, anyway, just basically it's just an excuse for me to have my geography moment each week, I think. But yeah, that's my favorite scene, I think, is the VX gas punch to the mouth. It's just badass.
My favorite scene is the meeting between Hummel and Mason.
No, it is a dope scene. Yeah, it's great actors too.
You get the hero walk, you get the fucking soundtrack. Like Mason's got his own hero.
Yeah. He's got his own score.
Yeah, so he's got his own hero theme. So you got that playing. He comes out of the shadows. There's no fear in the guy. He's like, well, where are my chips? Well, I destroyed them. And then they're talking about the tree. Was it the blood of innocence to refresh the tree of liberty from time to time? And he quotes Oscar Wilde. And he's like, I think you're a fucking idiot, General, sir. Like that whole thing, there's no back down from Mason at all. So, and
he's so good. Like that whole sequence where, an educated man and stuff like that, it can come off as really lame from some actors. But coming from Sean Connery, you're like, I totally buy into every single word.
You saw his prison style. He spent 30 years in outside prisons. He has read everything he can get his hands on. He's become like, he was already an educated man beforehand, obviously, but he's just like a poet's soul, I guess. And about him,
just who also happens to shoot people.
Yeah, and still, whoa, that one really, After 30 years, he still hasn't lost that.
That's okay to have on a podcast, as long as it didn't happen in school when you were like 16. Yes, miss. Oh no, I'm gonna have to kill myself now. Shit.
Ball's not dropped yet. Yeah.
It was like they could have like calling the teacher mum by accident. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to jump out of the window now. It's like my life is over.
Did you ever do that?
Calling teacher mum, of course. Yeah. And I did the high pitch thing. It was it was in college, late bloomer, obviously, and it was one of my first classes, and my voice, and I was, oh no, and that is the thing. At that age, it does feel like the end of the fucking world. But yes, I'm not sure if anything compares with calling the teacher mum in front of all your best friends. Fucking horrifying.
I got shit when I was younger. When you had to read out in class, and I had trouble doing 3, because. It all sounded like 3 when I was a kid, because unless I really tried to make the th sound as I was doing it. So I had shit for all. I couldn't say 3 properly, so everyone would just think, stop me fucking like.
But that's the thing, when you're like 12, 13, it seems like the most important thing in the world, doesn't it?
The things kids can pick up on when you're younger. It's like,
little kids are bastards. Kids are bastards.
Yeah.
In terms of loves and hates, love, number 1, Connery, number 2, Cage, easy picks. And number 3, I know you had some issues with it, but I actually think the genius premise goes a long way to making this film. It's understandable, a borderline heroic motive in many respects, and I think that drives a lot of the film. It adds drama and makes Ed Harris a much more relatable character. Like I said earlier, if they were all like Captain Fry and Captain Darrow, it just wouldn't have worked. Even, like I said, David Morse as Tom Baxter adds some additional depth there. So I think you have all those different characters, those different like drives behind the scenes, rather than just a bunch of bad guys doing a bunch of bad things. So I think that actually kind of elevates it beyond your usual 80s action hero fare, where it's like, well, we're the good guys, you're the bad guys. These guys, other than the 2 we've already mentioned, aren't actually all that bad. They're trying to do something heroic. They're just doing it the wrong way. As Mason says to him, I think you're a fucking idiot. You might be well intentioned, but you're a fucking idiot all the same.
I mean, I'm not gonna argue with you on that one. I said I'm not a huge fan of the premise in general, but my 3, for the action, for the story, for everything else, my 3 loves are Connery, Cage, and even though I love, don't forget his name, Ed Harris.
Ed Harris is great in this.
Cage talks too much, but it works for the film. Connery is stoic, but he is the aged action hero. I mean, he's
just the epitome of cool as well. He's so cool in this.
Obviously, Connery's doing Jerry action before Liam Neeson ever thought about doing Taken. So.
Yeah, I don't think he gets the recognition for it. It's odd because I think, and we've done it, we've been guilty of it more than anyone. It's like when you think of this film, it kind of gets dragged into the conversation of the Cage trilogy of the mid-90s. And I don't think people think of it as a Sean Connery film. But if you look at the poster, he's top billed.
Yeah.
It's Sean Connery ahead of Nicolas Cage. And it's like, first and foremost, this is a Sean Connery film. But I think everybody just thinks of it as being a Nicolas Cage movie because you attach it to the other ones. You think, oh, well, this is just one of the 90s Nicolas Cage movies. But this is a Sean Connery movie in many respects, and he absolutely carries it. And he's so goddamn good. And as I mentioned earlier, in a movie full of stars, he is the standout star. He is so goddamn magnetic in this film. He's great.
Yeah. And like I said, my 3rd is Ed Harris, because Ed Harris is he's fantastic as although I still think the plan is stupid. He's as the sympathetic general, as the guy who just wants the best for his men and stuff, and I think he's really good in it.
Yeah, again, and he's got to deliver some pretty cheesy lines, but he pulls it off. You believe him as this military leader trying to do the right thing, despite and even when he's making clearly stupid mistakes, you're like, his heart's in the right place, and he's gone down this. You can see even at the end. Like, he's in a sticky situation where, and they do it again without additional dialogue, where he's got these soldiers and he clearly knows at this point that these guys want to do something dumb. And he knows how they're going to react when he says, listen, they've called my bluff. I'm not going to fucking do this. But he can't let that on to the guys he's around. Not everyone's on the same page. That's the point. Yeah. So he's like, when he knows when eventually he has to say, listen, we're not shooting those fucking rockets. And he's going to have to turn on his own soldiers. Like, they do that all just through his acting ability, through looks. It's not kind of like you're not smacked over the head over it. You just slowly building up like, oh, this is going to come to a head at some point between those guys, which is, again, makes it more interesting, I suppose.
Absolutely.
In terms of hates, as much as I love it in this film, there are hints of what Bay would become once let off the leash. Like I said, he's great here, but it's in moderation. And as I mentioned previously, Bay is at his best when it's in moderation. It's Bad Boys 1 versus Bad Boys 2. It's Transformers 1 versus Transformers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. They just became more and more ludicrous. The best ones are always the ones when he's got a tighter leash and a smaller budget. So he can't just go throw everything at the screen like a fucking infant, because that's what he does. And it's one of the biggest issues of this film. I think it was Transformers 3, Dark Side of the Moon, or is that the name of the album? It's something along those lines. There is a 30-minute or so sequence in that where the Transformers, basically, they just destroy the city. I think it's Chicago. It almost doesn't matter. And it was like, I had to stop the film one point and just be like, dude, like, what you're seeing is unbelievable from a technical perspective. It was unfucking real. But because it was so relentless, you become numb to it. And that is the problem with a lot of big action films, is they don't know when to take the foot off the gas. And I think, again, in many instances, it's just a budget issue. So he's almost forced to take his foot off the gas. If it's just, it was, and we talked about this before, it feels like we were taking fucking crazy pills and no one else saw this. The biggest issue with John Wick 4 was that it was too long and too relentless. It was like you knew that these things you were seeing in John Wick 4 were amazing, but because it just kept going and going and going, eventually, no matter how awesome it is, you just become bored of it. And that's why the earlier John Wick films are arguably the best ones, because you see something amazing and it's, okay, we'll take our foot off the gas. Someone shows something amazing again. If it's just non-stop, you become numb to it. And that's the worst case scenario with Bay films, but you don't get it here. Gregory Sporlander and Captain Fry.
That was number one.
Yeah, I know. I do apologize. And we've said that a bunch of times, but Gregory Sporlander and, as Captain Fry, he's brilliantly unlikable. It seems a bit harsh putting him under hate, because I actually think he's really good in this film, but I still hate his character, even though that's the point.
That's right. I mean, so he did his job right.
He did, yeah. And I know you've already argued against it, but I've got them written down now, so I'm not sure if I agree with it anymore. But I'm not sure if you need Womack and Paxton, but you've kind of talked me off that ledge, but I've got it written down in front of me, and I can't think of anything better, so I'm just going to stick with it.
Stand your ground, dude.
I'm going to stand my ground. It's weird, I'm standing my ground while also admitting that it might now be bullshit, but never mind.
I mean, in past episodes, you've gone to 4, 5, and 6, so you can have 2 if you want.
No, it's 2. Yeah, actually, no. Yeah, just forget 3. I've moved on from 3. You've convinced me otherwise, so I'm just going to have 1 and 2. And even 2's bullshit, because I'm telling you how good he is. But, you're supposed to hate him, and I do hate him. I'm not sure if that's good or bad.
I've done it before, when you've had characters that you're meant to hate, and you do hate them in the film because they've done their job right.
Oh, yeah, and he is a snarly, horrible bastard in this film. And when he dies the most horrible death, you cheer because he's such a shitebag.
Yeah.
Like that, again, to bring it back to the point earlier, if that happened to Hummels, you'd be like, this is horrifying. If you kind of force it to the point where Hummels ended up fighting Nicolas Cage, and Nicolas Cage ended up killing him with like a VX gas punch to the face, it would have been horrific and it wouldn't have worked. You needed that character to be so horrible that you're both horrified and happy that it's happening.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
So now what am I moving it to love? Gregory Spoiler? Fucking hell, I'm so confused. Anyway, moving on. Jesus Christ.
I hate that it's a Michael Bay film, because I hate that I like a Michael Bay film. That's what I hate. Yeah. Like, I don't like Michael Bay films, but I like The Rock.
I think that's fine. I don't like most of his films. Like I said, I quite like the first Transformers film. I like the first Bad Boys film, and I like this. And even Armageddon. It's quite a bad film, but it's a fun film. I enjoy watching it.
I haven't seen Armageddon for a while, but
or me. I was just thinking that as I was saying it. I was like, is that film going to be fucking horrible now to go back and rewatch? It might be. We should totally do fucking Armageddon, dude. That'd be that's like a perfect excuse to rewatch Armageddon for this podcast. But then I'm like, oh, do we turn it into like Doomsday Duo and do Deep Impact as well?
I don't know if I could do Deep Impact.
I always preferred Deep Impact when I was younger. I'm not sure if I was out of my mind or not, but I suspect Armageddon is probably more fun to go back and rewatch.
Yeah.
Anyway.
My other hate, how fucking quick the Navy SEALs died. Like, it was ridiculous. It was, and I know you had to, because you had to carry but I don't know. Have them die by I don't know. That would have been dumber if they just blew up the rocket, but they would have been unexpected. You had these Navy SEAls. and then all of a sudden a rocket launcher takes him down. I think that would have been better than the dumbass way they died in the shower.
Yeah, and I think maybe I didn't have an issue at the time because I'm like, oh, well, Michael Biehn is almost playing against type. Like, you think he's going to be this great military guy and then he gets everyone killed. But at that point, I'm probably expecting to see Michael Biehn in another 101 movies over the next 20 years. But he just kind of disappeared off the map almost after this. Yeah,
this was the last, for Michael Biehn, it was the last, like, action-ish hero role that he could do in mainstream cinema for a while.
Yeah, I can't think of many like big movies he was in after this, to be honest. There are probably a few I'm forgetting, but off the top of my head, I can't remember.
Same. But yeah, I mean, they did it all with the whole like foreshadowing as well. Oh, we found a security threat in the shower. It's okay. I've got my own special little device. We haven't even mentioned John C. McGinley.
Oh, and just to be clear, that was the worst. Like, one, I'm not sure if that little mirror thing made any sense. And then two, we just kind of accepted, like, again, they start hinting straight away there that they're actually really incompetent. Like in the build-up, you're like, oh, this is like this military unit. They're the best. As soon as they get there, they fuck up the thing with the light, so they get caught immediately. Then Michael Biehn won't back down, despite the fact that he's in an unwinnable situation, which is going to get his whole unit killed, and immediately doubles down on that, so gets everyone dead. I'm like, these guys are just useless. I'm like, are you playing this for laughs? And I just don't get it. But that doesn't sit right with the Michael Bay approach, which is so pro-military. So I don't think he was intentionally going for that, but that's how it comes across anyway. The
only dumbest death is Danny Nucci, the guy that was meant to be with Sean Connery.
Mm-hmm.
You can hear his guys dying up there.
Just goes up anyway.
Decides to go up through the only choke point. As soon as that guy pops his head up through the fucking hole, he is dead.
Yeah. I don't know, like a misplaced sense of chivalry or something, or like, team. But I don't know. But it was a really, really dumb way to go. But again, it plays into this idea that this group of apparently elite commandos are actually all fucking morons, which they are. They're useless. They literally don't do a single thing right, other than they get Mason to Alcatraz. They get Mason to Alcatraz. Mason has to get them through. As soon as it's like go time for the SEALs or whatever the hell they are, they get killed. And they make a mistake straight away, and then they get killed. And it's like, that's it? You guys are rubbish. I don't want to be a dick, but you guys are rubbish. But it did give us the shower sequence, which is totally badass.
The video game, my third one is the video game levels underneath. Where you, level one is obviously going through the switched on furnace for some reason.
Yeah.
Level two is you said the Donkey Kong ride and everything. Was like, it's all, and linking that to the fact that he spent what feels like a week there underneath with nobody being able to find him from Alcatraz when he escaped.
It's all, everything underneath, and it's a great way of putting it, like the fact that it gets very video gamey. Everything underneath Alcatraz is ludicrous in this film. It's ridiculous. But I think it is one of the reasons that it takes a while for them to get to Alcatraz, because as interesting a setting as it sounds, once the SEALs get killed, they force them underground. They're basically just sneaking around, and I think they just went, "Oh, this isn't quite as interesting, and it's certainly not big enough. It's not like Nakatomi Tower where you've got different floors and a whole building to hide in. Alcatraz isn't actually all that massive. It'd be quite easy to find them. So everything has to go underground into this fucking video game level. So yes, and I wish I'd put that down as hates. The cart ride thing is absolutely ludicrous. It's fun, but it's dumb as shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any alternate titles for this? There shouldn't be, because The Rock, it's weird now, because obviously when anyone hears The Rock, they don't think the movie The Rock, they think The Rock, which is even like putting in searches, trying to find posters for this film. It's actually tricky because The Rock is the thing that comes up for everything. I understand he's one of the biggest stars in the world. But if you remove that from the equation and the complication that causes, The Rock is an absolutely dope title for this film.
Once again, you fucked up my joke. I was going to say, one of the ultimate titles for The Rock was Dwayne Johnson.
Oh, sorry. That's actually pretty good. Sorry, I totally fucked that.
Right, we've only got two.
Which, once again, Liam fucks up one of my jokes. He's a piece of work.
Because you don't shut up.
This is a podcast, dude. Jesus.
Right, sorry. So the other, we've only got two. They both called The Rock, but they have extra.
Yeah.
Okay. So Finland, it was The Rock Return to Hell.
No, it makes it sound like a straight to DVD movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, that sounds like a sequel.
It does a little bit.
But Austria, I don't know what they were thinking or what they watched.
Mm-hmm.
The Rock of Decision.
Rock of Decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Again, I have to believe in these instances.
It's a translation issue.
It's a translation issue kind of thing, because that makes absolutely zero sense. Like, there's something in Austria. You say it was Austrian, yeah?
Austria.
Austrian culture, where that sentence makes sense, because in English it makes zero sense. So yeah, I think we'll just stick with the Rock on that one.
I mean, we take these alternate titles with grains of salt. I love this little section about finding these weird named films all over the world and stuff. But grains of salt in translation is all I'll say with that one.
Oh yeah, 100%. But like it is amazing because I mean, obviously some movies are better than others in terms of their alternate titles, and as we found out, especially with anything kind of martial arts related, they go absolutely insane. But I'm still amazed that the film isn't just called The Rock everywhere, but some countries just can't help but add like a hyphen something or another. But yeah, those two are the dumber ones we've come across. They're both really fucking bad. Never mind. Facts, right. Sir, do you have any of them?
Yes, we have a few.
I'm sure there's a whole bunch, but
yeah. Sean Connery insisted the producers build a cabin for him on Alcatraz, as he didn't want to travel to the mainland every day, so they did it.
I didn't even think about that, because it's not that far, but I guess it's a bit of a ball ache going back and forth every single day.
On the ferry or the boat or whatever.
It's just a big dick play, isn't it? It's like, just make me a hut on Alcatraz. It's such a baller move, and again plays into that idea that even amongst all these stars, I'm the biggest star of the bunch. I'm Sean goddamn Connery. So yeah, fair enough. The
premiere of the movie was held in the recreation yard on Alcatraz.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's pretty badass.
While filming, Alcatraz was still open to the public, and many visitors watched the movie being shot. However, on December 15th, 1995, the federal government, which owns Alcatraz, partially shut it down due to stalled budget talks, and filming continued with no visitors present. So it's closed now, isn't it, Alcatraz? Or is it open again?
What, for visitors?
Yeah, for visitors. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's open. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like one of the it's a massive tour. Like they take a whole bunch of boats over every single day. It's a really cool tour. Like you said, you don't get to go into all the cells. You can go into some of the cells, and some of the cells obviously have their more kind of famous inmates, and they recreate them and stuff like that. But yeah, it is, and of course, like having the bay there and stuff is just such a unique setting. Like that's a big part of it. It's cool that it's an island. It feels it. And again, because of stuff like this, it legitimately feels like you're on a movie set rather than in a prison. It almost doesn't feel real. But yeah, visitors all the time.
Another baller move from Connery. There were tensions during shooting between Michael Bay and Disney studio executives who were supervising the production. On the commentary track for the DVD, Bay recalls a time when he was preparing to leave the set for a meeting with the executives and was approached by Connery in golfing attire. Connery, who also produced the movie, asked Bay where he was going, and when Bay explained that he had a meeting with the executives, Connery asked if he could accompany him. Bay complied, and when Bay arrived in the conference room, the executives' jaws dropped when they saw Connery appear behind him. According to Bay, Connery then stood up for him, insisted that he was doing a good job and should be left alone, and they just left him alone.
Yeah, who the hell says no to Sean Connery? Nobody. Like, if Sean Connery rocks up and tells you what to do, like, yeah, because he's the man, basically. Yeah. It's almost hard to believe that he struggled for a while. Like, because obviously he has these kind of like two careers, doesn't he? He had the Bond era, even if you go before that and like Where's Marnie and stuff like that, like the Hitchcock movie. But, most people remember him from the Bond movies. Then he had like something of a fallow period where, he had a few flops and stuff like that. Like when I was younger, I knew him as the guy who popped up in Time Bandits in like these really bizarre roles. Like at
the end of Robin Hood.
Yeah, the end of Robin Hood, like, because he still had that kind of cachet, but like this was part of that kind of like second or third part of his career when suddenly he became much bigger again, which, and it could have culminated in such a different way because, they wanted him to be Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings films, but, Sean Connery just turns down what he wants and instead ended up doing, what was the comic book movie he did? League of Gentlemen? Extraordinary Gentlemen, which I don't hate as much as some people do. I know if you've read the comics, it doesn't match up, but one of the reasons I actually found that film surprisingly watchable is Connery as Quarterman. I actually thought he was fantastic in that film. Well, maybe it's just because Sean Connery's a magnetic kind of screen presence, but it's still not a great film.
And also, to be the film that retired Connery, I don't know if you want to be that one.
No, you definitely don't want to be that one. You don't. It's just such a shame because if you read the source material, and you can see why people are upset about it. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is fantastic, the graphic novel, and you're like, oh, you got the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, you got this amazing comic, and you got Sean Connery as Quantum. It's like this could be amazing, and then it just turns into a totally whatever movie, which I think is ultimately what it is, rather than a truly terrible one. I think it's is it as bad as Catwoman? No, absolutely not. But it has become famous for retiring Sean Connery of all people.
Yeah. Me and Michael Bay have something in common. This is his favorite movie of his. Well,
there you go. There you go.
Much of Cage's dialogue was ad-libbed, including the Zeus's butthole line. Michael Bay wanted to cut it, but Cage insisted on keeping it. I mean, I don't know if Zeus's butthole is the hill you want to die on.
You can feel it throughout the film, and it gives it you can just see, I even thought that sequence you mentioned earlier where he's like, is his leg supposed to do that? Like, I can imagine they almost made it up on the spot and like, well, can you just flick your leg and I can deliver this line? A lot of his lines feel ad-libbed, but again, it gives it that slightly weird vibe and his character, that kind of weird energy, which, makes him stand out, I think.
Reportedly, Connery accepted the part of Mason after learning that Cage had been cast as Goodspeed.
That's cool. Yeah. Oh, well, that's the thing. They seem like odd bedfellows. I'm not sure if that term actually stands up here. But, you just don't think of Connery being like, I want to work with Cage. But Cage was coming off, he'd had Oscar success. He's just and I can imagine maybe he's looking and go, well, this is an interesting approach to an action film. It's like, why Nicolas Cage is in this? Fuck it, let's do it.
Ed Harris wasn't happy with Bay's occasional preference for tight shots while he's acting with his entire body.
Yeah, well, that's another one of those Bay things. The camera gets right up in their grill. They cut it around. He's not a actor's director, put it that way.
Schwarzenegger was offered Mason, but at the time the script was only 80 pages with a lot of handwriting and scribbles, so he just
handwriting and scribbles written on a napkin in blood. So Schwarzenegger turned it down. Luckily, Connery was bang into that. I don't want to say it'd be a bad film with Schwarzenegger because I love Schwarzenegger, but I'm so glad Connery ends up in the role. And he probably wouldn't have been old enough. It would have been a different film because Schwarzenegger would have been quite a bit younger.
People told Nicolas Cage he could never work in an action blockbuster because he was too quirky. He took that as a challenge. Well, yeah. Also,
and in fairness, the brilliant thing is he doesn't tone it down. He's quirky as fuck in this film, but it works.
Going back to what you just said about Schwarzenegger, there was no way they would have had the John Mason going through the furnace thing if it was Schwarzenegger, would they? Because he's been rolling over, is he?
Not a chance. Not a chance.
Right, what else have we got here? Nicolas Cage signed onto the movie initially just to work with the team of Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. He felt their movies had a timely sensibility about them.
Fair enough.
And I think we'll leave it there.
Fair enough. In terms of legacy, again, we'll get to it. The shower room sequence is now in 1,000,001 video games. Best quote ever. I stand by that. I think it is one of the best.
I totally agree with you, but
I know. It's
feel also I can't do accents, so I wasn't going to try.
I'm not sure if I can do accents, but I'm willing to give it a bash. I'll give it the old college try.
I can yell, so I did that. What kind of fucked up tour is this? I'm good with that. But
you did, and you yelled it very successfully, I might add. We've already mentioned start of one of the greatest action runs in cinema history for Cage. I don't think that's an exaggeration. When people talk about the great action runs, you think of Sly at the start to the mid-80s. Schwarzenegger is more kind of 85 through 88, 89, or even if you go right up to 91 and T2, I suppose. But yeah, 96 through 98, absolute better. It's just the fact that they're all back to back. There's no stinkers in between. Usually what you have is, even when you look at Schwarzenegger's run, there's a raw deal in there or some bullshit, as great as that run is. This is just three belters back to back to back.
Dude, I hate to be that person, but it was 96 and 97. Con Air and Face Off were both 97.
Were they both 97?
Yes. Yeah.
Dude, you can't have both those films in the same year. That's just cheating. Yeah. Absolutely ridiculous. We mentioned it a few times again, but it's cemented Cage as a bona fide A-lister and an action star. Before this, he had done great stuff. You mentioned it. He'd been in Raised in Arizona, Moonstruck, Leaving Las Vegas, but nothing suggested that he was going to be the world's biggest action star. Nothing whatsoever. No. The only thing close to it is maybe Matt Damon suddenly showing up in the Bourne movies. where it seemed like an odd choice, but he's playing the character as he is on the page. It's just, it's interesting that it's Matt Damon, but he's playing the character. It's like, that's just written in a different way. It's like, we want a dude who looks more everyday. The action sequences are going to be shot in a unique manner. Whereas this is like, we're just going to put Cage in this film and see if it fucking works. So yeah, nothing else quite like it. Best Bay movie. Realistically, it's this, Bad Boys, Armageddon, or Transformers. I think we both agree it's probably this.
It's this, and then maybe Armageddon. And then
I would say I've got a soft spot for the first Transformers film, but let's be clear, it's nowhere near as good as this. No. And as you said, we're not going to say it's the best action movie of the 90s with T2 in town, but it makes the top 10 with these. Really does.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
I think it does. In terms of score, soundtrack, before we actually get to the music in this film, I have to ask the question, £600 for a record in 1996? You could argue that it's aged well. Like, nobody's picking up a CD in 2023 over a record, whereas obviously records have really caught on again. But I checked online, Meet the Beatles, which is the album he buys, that could be bought on record for like £30. There's a mono version, but even that's like £120. The only one close to it is a first press, which I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and that cost $750 in 2023. But I'm still feeling like he overpaid in 1996.
I think he got a bit ripped off, and he probably knows he got a bit ripped off as well because he had it sent to the office.
He did, yeah. He's obviously, we've all done that. We're trying to keep a purchase from the other half. We're always like a little bit guilty. It's like, God, if this gets delivered at home and the wife picks it up, I'm going to get murdered. But again, one of those weird Cageisms. Is it required? It feels like he goes out of his way to explain that he's a Beatlemaniac, despite the fact that it really has no impact on the rest of the film. But hey ho, it is what it is.
And when he goes home, he's not even listening to that record. Like, you think he would be at home then listening to the record.
Well, he can't because the missus. I assume again, because if it's a first press, he's not going to open it up because it looked quite sealed as well. So maybe he's just like, he's not touching it. It's just for collectors. In terms of the score itself, it was by Hans Zimmer and Nick Glennie Smith. The latter was actually more prominent on the score, though. He's no slim Zimmer, but make no mistake, he's no slouch. He's worked on 141 movies, including We Were Soldiers, The Man in the Iron Mask, Planet Terror. He was the conductor on Bad Boys for Life, Aquaman, the live-action version of The Lion King, and the animated one, I think, as well. So he's certainly got range, but make no mistake, this is earnest, often somber Americana. Everything in this film just sounds military, but it works. Even the bombastic stuff tends to turn somber at some point. It's like, oh well, you can have fun in this film, but remember, many Bothans died for this information. Everything is geared towards the idea that Hummels is doing this for American soldiers and that American soldiers died. So you get like these big bombastic 90s action beats, but then suddenly the kind of the strings come in and it all starts feeling quite somber again. So it's quite unique in that respect. But when it does get big and bombastic, this is classic 90s, action score fair, whatever you want to call it. Like, I really feel like you could just take the music out of this, you could plonk it into stuff like Speed or The Fugitive, and it would work just fine. Yeah. But you say very good stuff.
But my favorite one is definitely Mason's hero theme. Because it's more Irish than it is Scottish when it's played.
Oh, it's Celtic as fuck.
Yeah.
And again, it lends into this whole thing. Like, they're fully aware that he's Scottish, he's Celtic, but they have that thing about him being English, which plays into the whole idea he's Bond. So, just out of interest, because I haven't even asked, do you think he's supposed to be Bond?
Yeah, I said at the beginning. In my intro.
You're like, not only like does it fit, you think Bay was actively making a secret Bond sequel, and that, and more important, I guess, was Sean Connery in on the act. Did they both have a conversation and say, listen, I know it's like your character's name is Mason, but we're secretly making a Bond movie?
Yeah, I mean, you can argue that fact, can you? Because
there's a lot to back it up. I'm not 100% sure that conversation ever happened.
It was already offered to Schwarzenegger, but it was a handwritten script. And
yeah, well, that's the thing. It definitely wasn't the plan initially.
No, yeah. So when it went to Sean Connery, then were there rewrites and saying, right, this is going to be like just play Bond? So I honestly think maybe that happened.
Well, that's, I guess, one of the questions. Like, did they have an initial script or draft for this film? And then, like, those kind of lines about him being English, because obviously Schwarzenegger, Jesus Christ, he wouldn't have been English. Were all those little things added, in terms of the dates adding up in the movies? Did they think about it enough, or is it just a happy accident? I so want to believe that he's playing Bond, that they're all in on it.
Yeah.
I've got a funny feeling that it's all just a happy accident and it's a coincidence. Like I said, I want to believe it. I just don't think. I think it's like, like when somebody shows you a video about like the September 11th, 2001, and then they show you like a dollar bill and like, oh, this is on here and the number 7's there, and it's like you want to make something work, so suddenly you've built this conspiracy. I feel like this might have been done to this, and it hurts my heart to say it because I so want to believe that this is secretly a James Bond 7 or whatever the hell it would be for Sean Connery. There's probably a bunch more films.
It's the same with another Bay film, isn't it? There's Pearl Harbor. Apparently, there's a scene in there where you have John McClane. After Pearl Harbor gets bombed and you see all the soldiers walk into the hospital, you see like a young John McClane with his vest walking there as well. But it's just an actor that looks like him with some lenses.
Yeah, I'm not buying. I mean, admittedly, this isn't that. I mean, there is, and again, I implore you all to watch that video because the argument is strong. It really is very strong. I feel like it's my heart over my head in this instance. I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Video games. So the most obvious one early doors was actually Rainbow Six 3, which was the original OG Xbox. It was one of the first games that broke out on Xbox Live. Because you got to remember back on the PlayStation 2 original Xbox, like. Playing online really wasn't a thing. So Xbox Live was in its infancy, and one of the first games that kind of broke out to a certain level was Rainbow Six 3, and one of the levels in that was clearly just a rip-off of the shower scene from The Rock. And I remember it so clearly, like you saw it, like, dude, it's from the fucking Rock. This is unbelievable. It just seems so cool. More recently, there was like the Gulag in Warzone. I think it was specifically the Verdansk map. It was clearly just a take on the shower room from The Rock again. But now it feels like that shower room is in just about every military shooter ever made. It just feels like one of those cool things. It does work as a level. There's things to hide around, stuff like that. It just looks cool. But I think it speaks more to Bay's impact on video games, which, make no mistake, is immense. I mean, Call of Duty 4, which was like the soft reboot for the series, absolutely used Bay and his directorial style as the template for the game. And the series has like never looked back. Other games think that they're copying Call of Duty, but really what they're copying is Bay. And arguably, I think that's where Bay's tone and style probably feels the most comfortable in 2023. In movies, it can get a bit much, but in video games, it seems a much more natural fit. And if you go back and play even the most recent Call of Duty games, their tone, their pacing, everything just feels like a Michael Bay film. It just does. He's had an absolutely ginormous impact, if only because he impacted Call of Duty, which has subsequently had a massive impact on the series. So it's boring and it's easy to say, but in terms of if I was going to have a Rock video game in 2023, I would just have Treyarch or Infinity Ward and just have them make Call of Duty the Rock edition. That's what I'd go for. I know that sounds, it's almost painfully obvious, but that's what I would do.
I'd go Ubisoft or Ubisoft, however you want to say it, and I'd have Splinter Cell, the Rock edition.
That's actually really cool. Oh, dude, see, now I'm immediately going back. It's like you could have like Mason the early years, kind of like you do it as a, him kind of.
I mean, even Sam Fisher would be Mason.
Yeah, that'd totally work. That's much better than mine. Oh, shit, never mind. Okay, so let's go. You win again. So let's go with Ubisoft Splinter Cell, the Rock edition, basically, only starring Mason rather than Sam Fisher.
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. In terms of scores and recommendations, I don't know how this is going. In terms of I think we're both going to recommend it. It's one of the best action movies of the 90s. It still totally holds up. In terms of a score, it's a very easy 4 for me. I don't think there's a few too many Bayisms, a few too many things, but still, again, I might have felt differently in 1996. Maybe I would have given it a 5 in 96 because I've seen all those Bay movies since. I'm like, those things kind of annoy me now, but it's still comfortably a 4-star film for me.
Yeah, I'd recommend it as a 4. There's not much more you could say to that.
No.
I'd recommend, if you want to see the only ever good Michael Bay film, watch The Rock. I would tell that to anybody. And I will double down and say future Michael Bay films. Michael Bay will never make a film as good as The Rock. So
he probably won't. It's that good, and it was hugely influential. And said it kind of started the Nic Cage run of the mid to late 90s, which brings us to what we're doing next week, I suppose.
Yeah, but sorry, and I would give it a 4 because I agree with you in regards to the fact that you can see Bay come through it in in some of the things. It's a bit much in places, so I don't think it's a 5, but it is definitely up there as one of the better action films of the mid to late 90s.
I'll put it this way, it's closer to a 5 than it is to a 3 for me. You know, like if we were doing the 10-point scale, like I would arguably, you know, this would be pushing for a 9. It'd be in the 8 to 9 region for sure.
It'd be a 4.75.
Yeah. And like you said, it totally stands up because, and a big part of that, again, is the Nicolas Cage performance, that it still feels weird. It doesn't feel old hat. There's nothing else quite like it, which, again, brings us next week. We're carrying on with the Nic Cage run. We're going to, it is Con Air next week, isn't it?
Con Air, yeah.
So, yeah, this is a much more traditional take on... Is it a traditional take? It's such a weird... In one respect, it is a much more traditional action hero role. But again, because it's Nicolas Cage, it's weird as hell.
It's a traditional action hero role for Nic Cage. But like Face Off, like The Rock, and all of these films, these 3 films, the premise is batshit crazy.
Oh, insane.
The Rock is the most grounded of the premises.
100%.
To the Rock grounded, but I didn't mean that. It's the of these premises compared to Con Air, which is, I don't know, Die Hard in the Sky, or Face Off, which is fucking insane.
I wonder though, and again, I don't want to go too far into this because, you know, spoiler alert, or obviously copying Face Off in a couple of weeks. Would Face Off be quite as insane if it wasn't John Travolta and Nicolas Cage? Like, it clearly wouldn't be. Like, you know, if it was like 2 whatever actors, it would still be weird and it'd be high concept, but I feel like we've seen high concept films. But I feel like it's elevated 3 or 4 steps quite comfortably by the fact that it has Nicolas Cage and John Travolta absolutely swinging for the fences. And that is one of the things about this film. Of course, Nicolas Cage is going for it, but make no mistake, John Travolta is there for the ride. He's going toe-to-toe with Nic Cage in that film. It's like, if Nicolas Cage is turning it up to 11, I'm turning it up to 12. And of course, Nicolas Cage is like, if he's turning up to 12, you can see where this is going. So yeah, that film's bonkers. But first and foremost, we need to cover this, you know, by comparison, still pretty bonkers Con Air. And a film I've not seen for a long time, when I'm really looking forward to. Another amazing ensemble cast as well.
I will say for Face Off, you're saying John Travolta being batshit as well in that. It's Travolta's renaissance at that point as well, isn't it? It went from 1994's Pulp Fiction, then you had like Broken Arrow in 96, which is another film we're going to have to do. Yeah. And then obviously Face Off.
Yeah, he had a solid run there, and it actually lasted quite a while. Like, again, a lot of duds in there, but, you know, he was, you know, back in the A-list for quite a while, and this was the peak of that. So, yeah, that's going to be really interesting. But first and foremost, Con Air next week. But again, thank you for listening to our take on The Rock. Please do join us next week, and cheers. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Sorry, I will actually reiterate. Let us know if you think it is actually a James Bond sequel, and let us know what you think would be on the microfilm. I'm really excited to see what people would be on the microfilm. So drop us a line, drop us a message. Let us know what you think is on the microfilm that kept Womack from not releasing John Mason / James Bond for 30 years.
Yeah. Let us know. All right, cheers, guys.
We'll see you next week.
Cheers. Bye. Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. We're also on email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. Just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing. Thanks for that, mate.
Cheers, Darry.
Yeah. And thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye.